I say ya boo to you! Boo! Hey guys, MasakoX here. Man, Dragon Ball Z was great, wasn't it? I mean, you got the Saiyan Saga, the Frieza Saga, the Android Saga, the Cell Saga. All total classics, iconic in each of their own right in some shape or form. And yes, Majin Vegeta and Vegito were pretty cool as well. Oh, what's that? I haven't really talked about the Buu Saga? Ooh, that's a real big chestnut there. It started out so promisingly too. Right after the Cell Saga finished, Dragon Ball Z was practically untouchable in Japan, especially with the ratings and the merchandising potential. It was just unstoppable. Even the initial forays after the defeat of Cell were pretty compelling in their own way. You know, with the Otherworld tournament, the beginnings of Gohan's life as nearly an adult going to high school. Those moments of him and the Great Saiyaman were really endearing. Getting to see his regular everyday life? That was kind of fun. In fact, now that I think about it, when I think about good slice of life moments within Dragon Ball Z, I think around that period after the Cell Saga and before the meat of the Buu Saga began. A lot of the dynamics here between the characters helped me inspire the work in Dragon Ball R&R. At least in terms of what the slice of life versions of characters could actually yield for me. The characters here are pretty likable, everyone seems pretty mellow, and the whole relationship between Gohan and Videl is pretty much the best romantic story that Toriyama's ever come up with. And it wasn't really that good, but hey, you know, points for trying, Toriyama. Even the tournament itself doesn't feel like a bad story. It had a good amount of action that kept people interested, and it had that genuine feeling of authenticity, which is true to the show, so bonus points for that one. It left the whole thing pretty entertaining, and one thing that I gotta say, which is the Buu Saga's best thing, is that the color vibrance of this series and arc is just great. It just looks so good. Everything is very vibrant, very dynamic. It's quite clear that the Buu Saga is trying to make a statement here. This next part of Dragon Ball Z is going to be different, but also kind of familiar. But yeah, we're gonna be moving forward. Even the likes of Shin and Kibito, Deborah and Babidi, those two pairs are pretty recognizable and they have not been forgotten. As you may know from some of my previous videos, both Haverock and I cannot just believe how underrated these two pairs were. Yes, it's obvious that I've talked about Shin and Kibito, but Babidi and Deborah? They really have been underutilized. Deborah looks really menacing, and his arsenal that he has to spare is very reminiscent of early day Dragon Ball in terms of its power and its kookiness. You know, with the whole sword thing and magical spit. Both of them feel really refreshing as magic-themed villains, which is very uncommon in Dragon Ball Z at this point, because really we've been heralding the advent of ki blasts and screaming, and just, you know, really bombastic fighting that could destroy planets. It's gotten a lot grander since the good old days. Babidi may not be strong physically, but he's very cunning, conniving, and very skilled in his magical powers, which makes up for the shortfall in terms of physical strength. And granted, his minions are nowhere near as interesting as the androids were, or any other minions for that matter. Even Android 19 had more going for him than Pui Pui, and that's something that both Haverock and I agree. And Spompovich made his mark for all the wrong reasons. Check out my worst moments in Dragon Ball Z video for more information about why I'm so salty about that. I don't often get salty, but here I did. Nonetheless, Babidi and Deborah are very interesting and unusual, and deserve their place in the Dragon Ball Z history books. Which means that by the time we actually then had to say goodbye to them in some shape or form, it was all very anticlimactic and it just suddenly happened. It felt like a wasted potential. We had magic-themed villains and now we don't anymore. Okay, bye. Aw, man. And yet, Majin Buu was the cause of that. And don't get me wrong, the first form of Majin Buu is the perfect subvertive convention that Toriyama is famous for. This is something that I like to see. Something is very unusual but slightly familiar, but it just makes us all go like, wait, what? And I bet a lot of the kids that were watching totally didn't expect Majin Buu to act like, well, a kid. And it kept people watching, it kept people reading, and as far as Shueisha and Toei were concerned, that's all good by them. However, this is the moment when the saga begins to fall apart, as it were, into just loads of moments of crazy cavalcades and really confusing junctures. You see, Majin Buu is interesting, initially. He feels very different from anything that we've witnessed so far in Dragon Ball Z. He's a very cheery, loud, and childish personality and antagonist. As a starting block, this is a very compelling plot point. As far as we're concerned with his personality, he may turn out to be good after all. All the talk of him being the most sinister and evil being in the universe might have just been all hyperbole, and it might have just been a storm in a teacup. There is a chance for that to happen, but then everything just falls apart. The problem is that Buu doesn't really become much later on. His two main gimmicks are turning people into sweets, and then also his bubblegum-like structure. And while his personality does shift between his transformations, because Evil Buu is quite unforgiving, it kind of just goes from Evil Buu to a slightly more Evil Buu, or slightly different Evil Buu, depending on who the guy's absorbed. Going from just a really knockoff Cell to then just pure chaos that is Kid Buu. The gimmick was still being used over and over and over again. Yes, it's true, Dragon Ball Z villains do get to change their appearance and slight persona once or twice. Yeah, that's a given, that's fair enough, and when we saw that initially with Buu, we're thinking, oh, okay, we know where this is gonna go. But Buu got like nearly 10 transformations. It's a lot. You're bound to get fatigue after all of that, and I'm sure that many of you can agree with me that you just thought, how many transformations can this guy have? And I'm talking about this one. This one was pretty funny. I think there is quite a good chance that there are moments in the Buu saga that you can genuinely just skip, right? There's just no nuance about how Buu works, like we got with Cell. Trying to piece together the components of his psyche. Cell was a proper fighter, whereas Buu, he's not. He was just out of control and quite frankly just felt broken. Kid Buu though does feel like a good representation of chaos and destruction, so that's something going for him. But the problem is that he appears far too late in the saga for any of us to really care and get us hooked, because we've gone through dozens and dozens of episodes of him going through different transformations that kind of feel the same, and we're just thinking, oh, another transformation? Had Kid Buu replaced Evil Buu and appeared immediately when the two separated, having Innocent Buu and then pure chaos, that might have been more effective, because Kid Buu, he's completely taciturn and mute, and Innocent Buu, he can talk, but not very well. There is a very good contrast there. It might have been a very shocking twist, but then we got that twist in the late 260s of the episodes, and we were just at this point, can this just end already? Listen, don't get me wrong, I like the whole thing about Mr. Satan and Buu becoming best friends. That was really, really endearing and cute, and it was very vital to what happened later on in the story. But the problem is, if you're not a fan of either character, all those episodes are really, really galling and utterly boring. It just feels like a sudden change in the story, like they'd completely forgotten that there was fighting going on, and it just, utterly stops the tempo in its tracks. But at least it kept people guessing, I suppose. And while we're talking about things concerning development, we gotta talk about another guy. And I think you know who I'm talking about. Gohan. The whole story arc, and I mean the whole arc dedicated to show that Gohan could become his own man after the Cell Saga, was just a waste of space and ultimately resolved nothing. The worst thing about this is that it didn't really teach us any kind of redeemable lesson or gave the character some kind of character progression. It's just a thing he gained, and then didn't use again. His personality didn't really shift. The only thing that we can really take away from all of that was that, yeah, Gohan just got too confident. Like every other Saiyan that we see in the show. Like how we saw with Gohan in the Cell Saga. Are you beginning to see a pattern here? While we may be making excuses for Gohan saying that, oh no, this was just Toriyama trying to make him the main guy again and it failed, or oh no, Toriyama's trying to subvert convention, you think that Gohan's gonna get the thing, then boom, he's not. Try and make Gohan more human, eh? Well, in the end, it doesn't really matter. I like a good subversion, but if the entire story is just based around heel turns and trying to have major twists and subverting the audience every single waking moment, it becomes a problem. It's too much. There aren't any reasons to come back to these stories because you're just thinking, oh no, that's just gonna happen. There's no point. You have to be very careful with subversion tactics. You have to use them sparingly and use them well. Normally, Toriyama is very good with this and he picks his times, but here, in the Buu Saga, Toriyama didn't really care. He used them so often, it got to the point where writers often dread things going, alienating the audience. If you write a story that ultimately just alienates the audience and makes them just second guess themselves every single time and just screws around with them, it's gonna make them think, well, I don't want to watch this, the writer's just insulting me. There's nothing to come back to this, there's nothing to hook on to, because you think, oh well, something might happen later on, I can't go through this again, I'm out. In an isolated capacity, they might not seem so bad, it's just one person. But, that's a manga not bought. That's an anime not watched. And in a collective sense, that is disastrous. Also, we got introduced to not just one type of fusion, but two types of fusion. These plot points, the fusions, were meant to be the goose that laid the golden egg and provide the ultimate solution to be able to stop Majin Buu in his tracks. It's meant to be the ultimate MacGuffin, but really, the whole Potara thing just ended up damaging more characters, not just Goku and Vegeta. Shin and Kibito, when they're trying to demonstrate the Potara potential, they end up just becoming far less than the sum of their parts in Kibito Kai. They go from an intriguing duo to just Captain Exposition, and that goes forward into the beginnings of Dragon Ball Super. Kibito Kai just ends up becoming the space equivalent of Krillin, and really that's an insult to Krillin, because at least Krillin does stuff in Dragon Ball Z. And here's a very touchy suggestion and supposition. In the way that it was actually portrayed, fusion isn't all that great. In a controlled environment, Gogeta and Vegito are fantastic. I love Gogeta. He is so cool. And getting to see him in the movie, that was fantastic. He was effective, he got to the point, he stopped the bad guy. Boom, boom, done. Vegito, when he could actually get down to it and wasn't being cocky, could actually do the job as well. Both of them deserve the love and admiration from the fans. Credit where credit's due here. But in terms of the overall series, the fusions got massively mullered. Why is this, Masako? Well, Gotenks, for all intents and purposes, did absolutely nothing except looked flashy, and just became extremely annoying in the long run. His only redeeming qualities is that he had some very unique animations and some very bizarre techniques that meant that you couldn't forget it. We got a few cool episodes of Vegeta fighting, but that's all we got. The old tactic of Saiyan overconfidence strikes again. Funnily enough though, Gotenks and Buu seem to be really fun playing them in video games for some reason. I think it might have something to do with the fact that we're in control of fighting as these characters, and therefore it makes things even more satisfying. Like, yeah, we're part of that and we can control these characters. Whereas in the anime, they're not as likable. Maybe it's just because you can directly engage with these characters? It's a thought for later, perhaps. I don't want to say that the Buu Saga is all terrible, though. In fact, it's not terrible. I just want to say that it mostly missed its mark. Still, we got some really good stuff from the Buu Saga. The whole Great Saiyaman thing, the Otherworld tournament, we got Vegeta's redemption, as well as the Peaceful World Saga. But did you ever feel like with the Saiyans, Cell, and Frieza, and as well as Vegeta, did Buu feel like the ultimate challenge for Goku in the long run? Heck, if somebody was better attuned at writing in GT, Shin Shenron might have been the better villain ultimate challenge for Goku. Far better than Buu. Dragon Ball's coming back to haunt the Z-Fighters. That was the perfect idea. Just shame about the traditional thing about poor execution. The Buu Saga just simply cuts out all the roots that were established from the previous arcs and just leaves us with a conclusion that is pretty unsatisfying. I mean, not counting the Peaceful World Saga, of course. The problem is, though, by leading us in the direction where the story went, Toriyama has ultimately defined the future of Dragon Ball. In fact, many of the problems that we have with Dragon Ball today come from this time period, especially the ones regarding Gohan and Vegeta's development. We are still suffering from these problems, and what problems do I mean exactly? Well, we're gonna have to wait until part 2 until we go into these in greater detail, so stay tuned for the next chapter of this little mini-series discussion. So what do you guys think? Was the Buu Saga your least favourite arc? Was it your favourite arc? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, be sure to like and subscribe. Catch you later!